Hey everybody, I'm Jordan with SANDCRAFT Motorsports DIY installation. Today we're going to be installing a DACB wheel bearing and a Polaris RZR. We're going to start by raising the vehicle and supporting it on stands. With the vehicle supported, we're going to go ahead and remove the first wheel. The next step is to work our way from the outside in. We're going to start by removing whatever cotter pin device you have and removing the axle nut. Now I'm going to move into the rock deflector on the brake. Now we're going to remove 2 caliper hanger bolts. Now we're going to remove our outer tie rod end hardware. After the hardware is removed, we're going to give it a little shock to separate the taper seat. Now we're going to remove our lower control arm hardware from the ball joint. Quick note, I forgot to mention, after removing the caliper hanger hardware, you can remove the brake hub and rotor assembly. Now we're going to remove the upper ball joint pinch bolt, and when you actually remove the hardware from the vehicle, be ready to catch the knuckle. Now that we have the hub to the bearing press, what we're going to do is make sure that our inner groove is nice and clean, free of any debris, because when the bearing is being pressed out, it will use that to score the surface. Just going to use a standard set of snap ring pliers, remove the snap ring. And now a little trick that I found for people that don't have, say, a perfect circle cut in their table and they're using just pressing plates, is I've actually got 3 of the 4 actual hub mounting bolts here, and I use them to create an artificial table. Now that way I can use almost any shaped table. From here, basically we're going to be pressing right on the inner race in hopes that it will force the whole outer race out as an assembly. So from here, we're just going to set it on our table. Using a large pressing slug. And just press from the inbound to the outside. From this point, what we need to do is clean up the bore on the inside, because not only is it a press interference fit, but we're also going to be applying a bearing retaining compound, so we need to have a clean surface. My preferred method is a chucked up wire brush versus, say, sandpaper, because we don't want to remove a lot of material, because again, it is a press interference fit, and we want to leave as much material as we can while just simply cleaning the surface. So the most important part of cleaning out the bearing pocket is getting down into these grooves right here. So there's going to be a residual leftover retaining compound, unless the bearing carrier is brand new. But you definitely need to use a straight razor or a scribe or something and remove all of this retaining compound. So in preparation for pressing in our new bearing, I'm going to use a brake parts cleaner, edge and degreaser, something of that nature, to remove all the last little bit of grease and oil. And then I'm also going to wipe down the brand new bearing. We're going to use green. We're also going to put it inside of the hub. This is also going to act as a lubricant for pressing. And what I've got here is the old wheel bearing that I've removed 1/2 from, just simply with a pry bar. Just pop this end right out. And this is actually going to act as a perfect pressing tool for our new bearing. Want to make sure that your bearing is all the way flush with the snap ring ledge. Snap ring, we're going to install this one with the flat side down towards the bearing, the chamfered side facing up and out. I'm going to start the installation of the knuckle by slipping over the CV and collecting the upper ball joint. And we'll go ahead and collect the lower ball joint. Nut washer on the back side. Installing the tie rod. If your CV axle has the through holes for a cotter pin, you want to orient them opposed to the studs so you can easily install a cotter pin and use tooling to remove it for service as well. Now our caliper goes on. Making sure that you haven't twisted the hose. High strength thread locker. Oh boy. Caliper rock guard goes on. Now we're going to install our axle nut with washer, cone side out. Oh no. Use some sort of holding fixture. And cotter key or alligator pin. Now that the installation is complete, we just wrap it up by putting the wheel back on and we'll bring the vehicle to the ground. Starting point for the rear wheel bearing replacement is first, if your vehicle has limit straps, you want to unhook it from the suspension so that it doesn't have a torsional effect while you remove the radius rods. Now we're going to raise and support the vehicle. Now we can remove the rear wheel. So we're going to work our way from the outside in when removing the bearing carrier. We're going to start by removing the axle nut retainer and then the axle nut. You have a brake hose protector. You want to remove that so it doesn't get damaged during service. Now we're going to remove the lower radius rod bolt through the bearing carrier. Remove the upper carrier. Now that we have the radius rod hardware removed, we're going to undo the brake caliper hanger bolts. Once the caliper is out of the way, we can remove the wheel hub and brake rotor assembly. Now that the trailing arm is only suspended by the shock and sway link, we're going to swing it out and pull the CV out of our way, and we can access the hub mounting hardware. Just before putting the carrier back onto the trailing arm, you want to clean both mating surfaces of the bearing carrier and the control arm. And you want to install all 4 bolts loosely before tightening any of them. So now we're ready to stab the axle back in through the bearing carrier. But you just want to make note that when you spline the hub on, you want to orient the cross through holes for your cotter pin and retainer to be opposed to your lugs so that you can get tools in and out. Now that the hub is on, we're going to put our upper radius rod in position, and now we can put our brake caliper back on. Now that our caliper hanger hardware is tight, we can install our lower radius rod. Now our hose protection. Now that our hub and carrier assembly is back together, we can reinstall our axle nut and washer. and our retainer. Now we're ready to reinstall the rear wheel. We're going to lower the vehicle and then reconnect the limit strap. All right, and that wraps up our wheel bearing installation. Thanks for watching SANDCRAFT Motorsports DIY, and always, enjoy the ride.